for this week. It's a lot of minor bug fixing, little pickup stuff from the end of the sprint. So let's get right into it. First of all, I've got the draw tick sent through the game as a single tick, through the scene manager as a single tick, into the scene, where the scene actually separates it out between 3D visualizer and 2D draw. As we talked about in class, that's mostly for organizational reasons. Um, I've also gotten the collision self-test to be a little more efficient with the fix we discussed in class, making this inner loop iterator start after the first loop iterator when checking for self-tests, so that it never tests against itself and collides with itself. The next thing is in the Quartz sprite, I have a static sprite model that is the asset manager get. That is set up here right as the default assets are loaded. I couldn't do it just as a static field because the attempted get from the asset manager would fail, because the statics are assigned before any of the code is run. So I have that static set up right here. Once all the default assets are loaded in, the static method is assigned, and I have reduced the amount of code in all the sprite constructors so that they use this quote-unquote base constructor method that's actually just a regular method that creates the graphics object, sets up the default scale rotation positions, and then sets up the passed in scale rotation position, and then I can use the base constructor in all these constructors here. Just reduces the code repetition. Yeah. So then the next big thing is I created the ColorVect class, which is essentially a wrapper to hold the vector for colors, but in an easier way to manage from a coder standpoint. So we have RGB values here. These are limited to 255 on the colors, 100 on the alpha. And there's a bunch of static methods that will allow you to get a specific color, whatever you want. I'm using inline ifs to make sure that whenever you set a color, whether that be by adding or by directly setting the number, the values don't go over 255. And then the other interesting thing is that when using the original vectors for colors, it expected a 0 to 1 value for all the colors. So since my ColorVect is using 0 to 255 and 0 to 100, I have an internal vectVersion of the ColorVect that does that, holds it in decimals, when necessary, can return it as a vector here. That reminds me, this is not default anymore. Anyway, I'll fix that. The last thing is bounding volume general class. Right now is being handled very, very poorly, but as we discussed in class, we'll fix that in a moment. Right now I just have it casting to a bounding sphere everywhere because I only have a bounding sphere and I can get away with that. Obviously, once we have the solution to the generalization issue, then I can fix that. Basically, what ideally I want to have is this just without the casts. I would love to be able to just get the volume of one, the volume of the other, and call the the correct intersect method based on the types of those two. I tried looking up some design patterns during class and outside of class during this week, but nothing was coming up with what I needed. And after class, I hadn't gotten time to go into the further lecture and deal with that. The color vector class took a surprising amount of time. But yeah, I think that's it for this week's sprint. I didn't get a chance to nail down and improve on my documentation yet. I've got a note here to remember to do that. I haven't fixed the giant switch in the command factory yet. Um, but yeah, a little bit of work done, lots of work still to go.